So I think Paul has pretty much summed it up. This is the beginning of a lot more to come. Obviously, will require a tremendous amount of communications, collaboration. At this time, if there are any questions, we'd be more than glad to respond to them. Obviously, as Paul said, there'll be numerous other opportunities to engage in dialogue on this.
Does any member of council have any questions at this time? I just have one quick one. I'm assuming this is a TIF, CDA, TIF kind of arrangement?
Most likely will require a TIF arrangement in both cases.
Okay. You know, I'm looking forward to the meetings on this, but I know that everyone's going to be very interested in seeing at least some pro forma analysis of what that is proposed to look like. That's going to help us a lot going forward.
That's going to be absolutely critical. I would agree.
Right. Okay. Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Mr. Black.
Good afternoon.
The fact that the project got started somewhere around the beginning of the year and these courageous people trudged on, only in the last 3 weeks have we seen an economy that's ripping America apart. That they're still in the game is fascinating to me and rather encouraging. I do want to know if any thought had been applied to how this might compete with current downtown development. And not only the downtown development, there's some pretty big projects going up in the counties. How does that interplay is my first question. And secondly, we talk about baseball, but we've had a professional basketball team in here that fizzled. And hockey teams have come and gone. And I'm just curious to know how far can we get with this notion of resurrecting baseball in Richmond, until which time, as a region, Richmond becomes community-minded enough to support one.
Well, to start with that question, Mr. Jewell, and I think I would follow up on what Paul has already said. The subsequent discussions and dialogue that will take place from today over the next 120 days and probably beyond will be those discussions that ultimately I believe will answer those questions. I don't really have an answer for that second question because I don't believe it really resides within one person or a couple of people. I think it's going to have to be a wider dialogue, more of a collaborative discussion that is to be seen at this point. But I think what Paul has outlined in terms of a process can get us there in terms of including all of the right groups of the community to really look into that. Because obviously, as President Panley has stated, the state of the economy obviously cannot be ignored. Both initiatives will require some form of a TIF. So in that case, which piggybacks to your question, Mr. Jewell, in those two cases, those TIFs and the analysis behind them will have to be able to pass a very, very strong reality test. And all of that will force that discussion and whatever the decisions are going to be made. In terms of the competitiveness question, your first one, I may have to defer to Paul a little bit in terms of some of the economics associated with the competition elements of it. But as Pete mentioned, when we got the RFP responses, just about every one of the responders basically stated that if you want baseball, on the boulevard, we'll give it to you, but we don't think that's a good idea. So we listened to them and we went an extra step. We contracted with ERA to do some econometric analysis, and they looked at the bottom, that location, and I believe obviously they came up with a very favorable analysis in terms of being able to pull it off, but the exact dollar figure, was it 30 million? don't you come? I'm going to let Pete, he was a little closer to that than myself.
Yeah, Mr. Jewell, the ERA figures, I don't want to quote them because I don't have the study right in front of me, but they clearly showed that a location down in the bottom was more beneficial than a location out at the boulevard in terms of long-term revenue generation for the city, the ability to generate tax revenue for the city, and the ability for the private sector to thrive around a stadium down there as well. So I don't know, I prefer not to quote the numbers because I don't have them, but that was clearly the conclusion.
But clearly, we'll have a better sense of that once again in the subsequent analysis that's going to take place, the discussions that are going to take place. Now, this is the beginning of actually getting down into the weeds with respect primarily to a lot of the numbers and what's going to actually be realistic.
Well, it's a follow-up.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to sound pessimistic. It's an exciting project. My concern, and surely it's not the job of the master developer to fix the problem I'm referring to. The point is that's something we as a region, our county partners, our city, and all of us are going to have to address. How do we become more community-minded enough as a region to support the kinds of things that we're talking about, be it a ball team and field, or be it a performing arts center, or anything else that we're doing here that is to serve the region. Somebody's got to work on the human side of that and do some branding and do some work at getting us together as a region, the people of the region.
And I think that Highwoods is very, very sensitive to that, and that's a big part of what they're planning in terms of next steps.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Robertson, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pantley. Mr. Black, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Certainly, these two sites off of the interstate that for us to be such major owners of the land, it would be foolish of us to not try to put together a master plan for those sites. Hope you move on down 95. There's another opportunity after we get through this process. I look forward, and I want to, let me say first of all, I'm very happy to hear you saying that this is still just a process of engaging the community and giving the community a greater opportunity to have a significant voice in what is being done. I find it a little interesting as it relates to the master developer. I want to go back to make sure I'm understanding that relationship a little bit more clearly as it relates to the city's involvement or city's obligation and commitment in signing this contract. What are the terms and the condition of that contract? What does it cost us for the engagement into this contract? And then I have a follow-up question.
Okay. This is a pretty simple one to answer. What we've given to Highwoods basically are award letters, giving them a 120-day opportunity to successfully negotiate definitive letters of intent for both locations. At the end of the 120 days, and this costs the city nothing at this point, at the end of that 120-day process, both parties can elect to continue working towards negotiating a more definitized letter of intent. So it costs the city at this point nothing. It's granting Highwoods an opportunity to negotiate an executable letter of intent, which gives you a lot of the details, a lot of the numbers, which will answer the question ultimately, what will each of these projects ultimately cost the city government itself? And that's to be determined during this 120-day period.